Okay, we're moving right along, and our next storyteller was over at the visitor center telling as part of the play from the radio show to the veterans over there. But we're so glad she was able to make it over and join us, and she has some special things going on. Catherine Yale Sirota is a Western North Carolina native and now living at Flag Pond, Tennessee. Everybody knows where Flag Pond is, right? Don't speed through there, you'll get a ticket. She tells Jack tales, Appalachian folk tales, and personal narratives from her well-traveled life. And she has had some adventures that I've heard her share. Tonight, she's bringing us the first story in a 4-part Little Bobby series titled Little Bobby and Granddaddy. Let's see what the young scamp is getting into tonight.
Well, I don't know about y'all, but my heart rate is still a little bit elevated. But I may be a little careful too. I spent about 39 years in Haywood County, North Carolina, and the whole Little Bobby series is placed right there. The story tonight is called Little Bobby and Granddaddy. Now, as I've shared with a few people, Granddaddy is not a relative of Little Bobby's. Now, he might be somewhere on the evolutionary ladder, but we will try and determine that a little bit later. Now, Little Bobby was born at the confluence of Big and Little Sandy Mush Creeks in Madison County. His parents had already brought forth 5 children, but this pregnancy, his mother, Maud Jane's last, was proving to be a bit of a problem. So the family decided to stay with her parents in Madison County during her confinement. Now, Maud Jane had been born on the creeks herself, and she met her husband Irving at Mars Hill College, where they both studied. Her father was the doctor in Madison County, and he rode his big chestnut horse on rounds all throughout the county, and he handled the baby's birth just fine. When little Bobby was about 3 years old, the family returned to Haywood, and they built a log house on top of Beaver Dam Gap. Now, here was an interesting mixture of geography and government. Beaver Dam Gap was in Haywood County, but it shared a common line up at the top of Madison. East of Beaver Dam, and just a few little hundreds of yards to the east, was Newfound Gap, and it shared a common Haywood County line with Buncombe County. So therefore, all 3 counties were stitched together at the top of the world. Now, this became Little Bobby's world, his entire world. He could walk from his house on Beaver Dam over to Newfound in about 15 minutes, and he loved that place. There were spring heads on Beaver Dam Mountain that flowed down into Beaver Dam Creek down in the valley. There were spring heads on Newfound Mountain that flowed into Hominy Creek down in the valley. But Little Bobby renamed Hominy Creek as Blue Creek. The waters were pure and sparkling, Blue Creek, and it was his happy place. Now, to the west of Beaver Dam Mountain was another mountain, Bearwaller Mountain. Little Bobby had hidey holes, and if he wished to be hidden and not found, only the hunting hounds could dig him out. Bearwaller Mountain was his safe place. Now, I'd love for you to know that little Bobby began to explore these places when he was only 4 years of age. He was a very curious child, and these places were still wild at that time, and so was he. Around the turn of the century, about 20 years before little Bobby was born, an incident happened over on Bear Walker. This was the time of the last great livestock drives down to South Carolina. They originated in Hot Springs in Madison County and points west in Tennessee, right here, and in Kentucky. Turkeys and goats, sheep and cattle and hogs were all driven down over the gaps. They were driven down to Clyde in Haywood County, where there were large livestock pens and boarding houses right along the Pigeon River that provided a night's respite from the hard drive. Now, about this time, about 20 years before little Bobby was married, a group of drovers was bringing their stock over the Beaver Dam Gap, and they fell out. I don't know if it was over dishonoring one of the sisters or some other familiar type of human kerfuffle, but a great uproar was caused, and the fellow drovers hung the man on Bear Walker. Little Bobby would hike over there and stand and gaze and wonder at that big old white oak hanging tree. It was still right there, and it was notorious. Also about this time, the fast-spreading chestnut virus arrived in the southern Appalachians. You heard Adam today talk about the chestnut trees. It devastated these huge, beautiful trees, these broad canopy trees that had constituted a third of the Appalachians woodlands. One by one, these giants were infected, they died and fell to earth. A man could stand beside the trunk of one of these, and it would be way above his head. Now, about the time little Bobby's wanderings, most of these had been hauled out to local sawmills by teams of oxen and mules, but there were still a few rotting logs about them. They became homes to small mammals and reptiles. Now, the tops of Beaver Dam and Newfound are largely outcroppings of huge stones left over from the last ice age. So they have been there for millennia. And the ingress from Beaver Dam to Newfound was through a sort of tunnel where there were tall sentinel-like rocks standing almost meeting at the top. And little Bobby would pass through here just about every day on his way to the Blue Creek. Now, I like to think that our mountains are just big piles of rocks held together by a little bit of very rich, humusy soil. If you clear the land for a new field in the fall, over the winter, these rocks appear to propagate underground and emerge in the spring. The repeated action of freeze and thaw and freeze and thaw brings this about. And anybody who's tried to farm the heights, they know this very well. It's just a rock pile up there. Now, little Bobby, on one cool October morning, was passing through this rock passage. It was nice and cool in the morning. He was just going along, enjoying the morning, the early hours, humming an old ballad that his Granny McIntosh had learned. And he never noticed anything particular about the passage. But this morning, there was something strange in the air. It sounded like a breeze ruffling through a pile of dry leaves. But there were no leaves on these rocks. They were clear from erosion. No leaves. And there was no breeze coming through the rock passage. He stopped to ponder this. He looked around, and then he looked up. He saw a huge timber rattlesnake, the granddaddy of all timbers, poised up there on the rock, ready to strike. His rattles giving a last-minute warning. Oh my goodness. Bobby quickly calculated that Granddaddy was almost 5 feet long and as thick in the middle as his father's forearm. What to do? What to do? The big Bobby head was swaying back and forth, trying to get a good bead on Bobby. If he stood still, the snake would surely strike him. If he moved to the left or to the right, the snake would surely strike him. In a moment's flash, he chose to hurl himself to the ground. He was out of immediate range of the snake, and he began to inch himself backwards through the rock passage on his belly toward the man. The snake's rattling became even more furious. It was like he was fussing. He had missed a good hit. Now, Bobby thought about this as he inched backwards. He knew that snakes did not use their venom unnecessarily. They saved it for prey. And he could not understand why this snake had chosen to threaten him. Well, he got up. His knees were shaking, his feet weren't working, but he willed those feet to move, and they carried his little legs as fast as they could back to Beaver Dam. His mother, his oldest siblings, and his uncle were all out in the yard when he got back. They were hauling the big iron boiling pot from the shed out back. They were carrying it to a grate that had been placed over a fire freshly made in the front yard. There was a small mountain of sweet cane stalks laying right beside the hand-cranked crushing machine. It was molasses making day. Little Bobby's mouth began to salivate and drip as he thought about that sweet, thick syrup pouring down over Mama's hot buttered biscuits. Oh, his mind dwelt on all of the delightful images of molasses, and he temporarily forgot about it. Come over here, Bobby. You're old enough this year to help. You can feed the crusher. Well, that suited him just fine. He was eager to help him, and in his mind's eye, he saw himself heroically pushing the stalks through the crusher, splitting them in the sweet juice coursing in the pot. Oh, he loved molasses making day. Maybe he would be allowed to help by stirring the pot with the big ash paddle. It was important to keep the juice moving in the pot as it heated, because there was nothing worse than burnt syrup. Maybe he'd be allowed. In his mind's eye, he saw that syrup moving under the figure-8 movement of that ash paddle, and that brought back to his recollection the sway of snakes. To his surprise, he was no longer afraid of that snake. He began to appreciate the beauty of that rust-colored stripe that ran down the middle of Granddaddy's back through the chevrons toward the narrowing black velvet tail, dipped with the ivory rattles and buttons. He even thought and smiled at the recollection of the big venom-filled Buffy head. Granddaddy was a beauty and a survivor, a magnificent hunter and a focused killer. He belonged right where he was, doing what he did best, on the rocks, the king of his country. Bobby began to see himself as Granddaddy's guard and his protector. And in that moment, he made a decision that he would not tell his father or anybody else about Granddaddy. Now, he'd run home. He was just a little boy, and he had wanted the comfort of his mother and daddy. But he decided that he was growing older now. He didn't need that. What he needed in that moment was a greater understanding of how everything that lived on and proceeded on his mountain paradise all worked together and it all belonged together. And he began to see it as their protector, not their executioner. If he told his daddy, he'd take a long handled hoe to the passage and he'd kill granddaddy. As Bobby grew older, this understanding shaped his life and gave meaning to all of his decisions. He would become a writer and a champion of the natural environment. And it all began with a confrontation with an ancient rattlesnake he named Granddaddy.
Thank you, Catherine. We look forward to the next 3 stories. Okay. Now, who has to go to the bathroom? No. We're gonna take just a 3.5-minute break, okay? Because we have lots of stories coming from this man with the mustache sitting down. And we want to give him as much time as possible. So if you'll just go ahead and do your thing and come back, you know, that would be great. And leave us. Yeah. But I have a tour company and I'm putting together a tour where we can all go and see him at one time, okay? Is that one? Joe, but no, I'm not gonna take much time because I want Jeff to have his 30 minutes. And I just want to say, oh, I can't see that. No, I can't see that. Do you remember? No, I can't say that. Jeff was president of the Guild in 2017, and he really stepped in at a very crucial time. We had just lost our president, and Leon Overbay, which a lot of y'all know. But Jeff just came in and he listened, which is the most important thing a storyteller can do, isn't it? But he listened and then applied it to what was going to be the healthiest way for the Guild to go. And speaking of health, Jeff and many other people in the Guild have been working for years on the bedside storytelling program with Family Health. And Jeff was able to bring it all together so that the Guild could be part of that. I don't want to take any more of his time. I would love to stand up here and tell you things I know. And maybe Jolene doesn't. We had a wonderful time on the trip, and I will never forget my little granddaughter when she was 2, laying on the floor at your house between these 2 beautiful greyhounds, you know, and just having the best time. But ladies and gentlemen, hot from Portugal, please welcome Jeff Stratt. That's me. Yeah. It's good for me.
Wow, thank you all. I last told up here 4.5 years ago when we were leaving. And, never imagined I'd be back. But I am. Prove it. Prove it. Mr. Blah Blah is back. My wife got me these license plates a number of years ago, and I rode around in town. This is my actual Tennessee license plate. When we moved to Portugal, I hung it on the wall. They do not have personalized license plates there. No, they're issued. To try to explain the story behind this is tough. But Blah Blah is here for happy. Right? Very quickly, may I have I was supposed to tell last Tuesday. Our plane got canceled at the last hour because of issues in the UK. We were held up for 2 days. And so I couldn't tell last Tuesday. And I thought, well, I'm dead for telling. And Catherine gave up tonight. This is supposed to be her spot right now. So, little gift from the two of us, European chocolate and French soap.
Oh, they didn't. It's so good.